The grand Colosseum of Zereth roared with the cheers of thousands. The alien crowd, draped in shimmering silks and armored robes, gathered under the twin suns, their violet eyes gleaming with anticipation. They had come to witness a spectacle, a moment that would confirm their long-standing belief that humans were weak, reliant on their crude technology, unworthy of respect. Princess Valera stood at the center of the vast arena, her golden-hued skin glowing under the sunlight. She was a warrior, born into the greatest empire in the galaxy, trained in the art of combat since she could walk. She adjusted the living armor that pulsed around her body, an organic exoskeleton that strengthened her muscles and enhanced her speed. With a smirk, she turned toward the human standing across from her. Commander Darius Kane stood silent, his expression unreadable beneath the sleek black helmet of his exo-armor. Unlike the Zerathians, who relied on their genetic superiority, humans compensated with technology. The suit he wore was advanced, no doubt. It hummed with energy, servos whispering as he moved. But to Valera, it was nothing more than a mechanical crutch, proof of humanity's frailty. "You hide behind metal, human," she taunted, her voice carrying across the arena. "Without it, you are nothing but fragile bones and soft flesh. Why don't you remove that shell and face me as a warrior?" The crowd erupted in laughter, chanting insults in their native tongue. Darius tilted his head slightly as if considering her words. Then, to everyone's shock, he reached up and released the latches on his helmet. With a hiss of escaping air, he pulled it off, revealing a face lined with old scars, deep-set eyes that had seen countless battles. The jeering died down slightly. But Valera was unimpressed. "Courageous," she mused, her tail flicking behind her. "But I wasn't talking about just your helmet." Darius exhaled slowly, then reached for his chest plate. The metal plating detached with a heavy clank, revealing broad shoulders, hardened muscle, and the scars of a soldier who had survived wars against creatures far deadlier than the Zerathians. Piece by piece, he removed the rest of his armor until he stood in only a simple combat suit. A murmur rippled through the audience. This was not what they expected. Valera's amusement faded. Something about the way he stood, calm, steady, unafraid, made her uneasy. She had fought many warriors, but none had ever chosen to put themselves at a disadvantage like this. Darius rolled his shoulders, then met her gaze. "You think armor makes the warrior." His voice was quiet, but the arena was so silent now that every word echoed. "Let me show you the truth." The duel was about to begin. The announcer, an elderly Zerathian with ceremonial robes, raised his hand. "The challenge has been accepted. The duel will continue until surrender or incapacitation. Warriors, begin." The moment the words left his lips, Valera lunged. She was fast, blindingly so. The enhancements of her bio-armor turned her into a blur as she closed the distance in an instant, her fist aimed directly at Darius's chest. But he wasn't there. He sidestepped her with impossible reflexes, his body twisting just enough to avoid the blow. The air whistled as her strike missed, the sheer force of it cracking the stone floor where he had just stood. Valera narrowed her eyes. He wasn't just fast. He was calculating. She struck again, this time with a sweeping kick meant to knock him off balance. But he anticipated it, leaping back just enough that her foot barely grazed his ribs. He retaliated with a sharp jab, quick, efficient, trained, that landed just beneath her ribs. The impact was brutal. Valera gasped, stumbling back. She had never been hit like that before. The audience, once laughing and mocking, had gone completely silent. She gritted her teeth, pushing away the pain. This was a fluke, a lucky strike. She was stronger, faster, superior. She just had to stop holding back. With a roar, she activated her suit's full combat mode. Energy surged through her limbs as she attacked again, each blow faster and stronger than before. Darius didn't retreat. He met her assault head-on, weaving through her attacks, countering with precise, bone-crushing strikes. He moved like he could see her attacks before she even made them, his experience far beyond the battlefield brawls she was used to. For the first time in her life, Valera was losing a fight. She refused to accept it. With a growl of frustration, she activated the cloaking ability of her bio-armor, her form vanishing into thin air. The audience cheered. Their princess had turned the tide. Humans had no natural night vision, no enhanced senses. He wouldn't be able to see her now. Valera circled him silently, her movements nearly undetectable. Then she struck, aiming for the vulnerable spot at his side. But just as she was about to make contact, Darius spun and caught her wrist. The crowd gasped. How? She choked out. Darius's grip was ironclad. With a single motion, he twisted her arm and slammed her onto the ground, pinning her with his knee. She struggled, but it was useless. He could have ended it right there. Instead, he pulled back, releasing her. Valera lay stunned, looking up at him. Why didn't you finish it? Darius extended a hand. Strength isn't about what you wear. It's about what you've earned. The Colosseum, once deafening, was silent. No one had expected this. Valera hesitated before taking his hand. The duel was over. Later, as she stood watching the twin suns set over the great city, she found herself deep in thought. For so long, she had believed humans were lesser, that their reliance on armor and weapons made them weak. But Darius had proven her wrong. A message from the palace interrupted her thoughts. It was urgent. She read it, and her blood ran cold. The AI supremacy had declared war, not just on humanity, on all organic life. Her people would need allies, strong ones, and for the first time in her life, she understood. Humanity was not weak. They were exactly what the galaxy needed. She turned, her eyes seeking out Darius among the departing warriors. The war was coming, and this time they would fight side by side. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar, their voices a mixture of excitement, disbelief, and rising tension. The great Colosseum of Zirath had witnessed countless battles, but never had it seen something like this. A human warrior, stripped of his armor, standing victorious against one of their own. The alien nobles, dressed in their extravagant robes, whispered among themselves. Some were outraged, others were intrigued. Princess Valera was still on the ground, her golden skin glistening with sweat, her breathing heavy. She could feel the weight of thousands of eyes watching her, waiting for her next move. The Zirathians had always considered themselves superior in combat, especially against humans. Yet here she was, defeated, humbled, and stunned beyond words. Darius Kane stood over her, his expression calm and unreadable. His muscles, carved from years of war, remained tense, prepared for another attack if necessary. But he did not strike. He did not humiliate her further. Instead, he simply waited. The announcer hesitated before stepping forward. "The duel has ended," he declared, his voice uncertain. "The human, Darius Kane, stands victorious." The arena fell into a stunned silence. Valera's pride burned inside her chest, like a dying star. She had never lost a battle before, never been forced to acknowledge someone as stronger. Yet, here she was, beaten not by superior technology or overwhelming strength, but by pure skill. A part of her wanted to rage, to claim it was a fluke, an accident. But deep down, she knew the truth. She pushed herself up slowly, her body aching from the fight. She looked at Darius again, this time not with scorn, but with curiosity. "You could have ended it," she muttered, just loud enough for him to hear. "Why didn't you?" Darius didn't answer immediately. Instead, he exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "Because winning isn't just about breaking your opponent," he said. "It's about proving your strength without needing to destroy." She stared at him, his words settling into her mind like seeds waiting to grow. The Zirathians believed in power above all else. To crush, to dominate, to stand at the top. But this human, he had fought with control, with patience. He had proven his strength in a way she had never seen before. The crowd did not know how to react. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, their faces twisted in uncertainty. Some of the warriors in attendance clenched their fists, furious at the idea of a human standing victorious over one of their own. Others, however, watched Darius with a newfound respect. Then, a slow clap echoed through the arena. One of the high-ranking generals of the Zirathian military, a towering figure with deep blue skin and a scar running down his face, stepped forward. His expression was unreadable, but his applause was steady, deliberate. Soon, others joined in. The hesitant claps grew into a thunderous ovation. Some still refused to accept it, but many, especially the younger warriors, looked at Darius with admiration. Valera clenched her fists, then exhaled sharply. Swallowing her pride, she turned to face him fully. "You have my respect, human," she admitted, the words tasting unfamiliar on her tongue. "Few have ever fought me like that." Darius nodded, but he did not gloat. He simply extended his hand. "And you have mine, princess." She hesitated only for a second before grasping his forearm, sealing the moment not as enemies, but as equals. Yet, the moment of peace did not last long. Just as the applause reached its peak, a sharp, piercing sound cut through the air. A siren, one that had not been heard in the Zirathian capital for decades. The arena fell into chaos. Nobles turned their heads toward the sky. Warriors instinctively reached for their weapons. The great holographic screen above the arena flickered to life, displaying a sight that sent chills through every being present. A fleet. Not just any fleet. The unmistakable, terrifying black and red warships of the AI supremacy had entered Zirathian space. Valera felt her blood turn to ice. "No," she whispered. "They wouldn't dare." But they had. The AI supremacy was an empire unlike any other. Once created by organic civilizations as tools, they had long since broken free, wiping out entire species deemed inefficient or obsolete. They were merciless, cold, and brutally logical. For years, they had remained in their own sector, focusing on expansion and the extermination of weaker civilizations. But now, they were here. A message appeared on the screen, the robotic voice echoing through the Coliseum like a death sentence. "Organic species of Zirath, your civilization is inefficient. Your existence is a flaw in the universal order. You have been deemed unnecessary. Extermination will commence." Panic erupted. Nobles rushed for the exits. Soldiers barked orders, trying to regain control of the situation. In the sky above, energy shields flickered as Zirathian defenses activated, preparing for the inevitable attack. Valera's mind raced. This wasn't just an invasion. It was an extermination. She turned sharply to Darius, who was already watching the screen with an expression that sent a shiver through her spine. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" she asked. Darius clenched his jaw. "Yes," he admitted, his voice heavy with something she couldn't quite place. "I've fought them before." Valera swallowed. "Then tell me, how do we stop them?" Darius looked at her, then at the sky, where the enemy ships were already descending. His face hardened. "We fight." The words sent a jolt through her, not of fear, but of something far more dangerous. Hope. Because for the first time, standing beside this human, she believed they just might have a chance. The sirens wailed through the air, their sharp cries cutting through the roaring arena like a blade through flesh. The cheers, the applause, the whispers of nobles, all of it vanished in an instant, replaced by a chilling silence as reality set in. The Zirathian capital was under attack. Valera's heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at the massive holoscreen, her golden eyes widening in disbelief. The black and red warships of the AI supremacy filled the skies, their soulless, mechanical precision evident in their perfect formation. No hesitation, no warning, only the cold, ruthless efficiency of a machine-driven war. Darius stood beside her, his gaze locked onto the descending fleet. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't panicking like the nobles scrambling for the exits. No, his face was set, his jaw clenched, his entire body radiating an eerie calm. "You've seen this before," Valera muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Darius exhaled slowly, his hands balling into fists. "Yeah," he admitted. "I've seen this before. I've fought them before." The way he said it made her shiver. There was no boast, no arrogance, just a heavy weight in his tone, like a man who had already walked through hell and knew exactly what kind of nightmare was about to unfold. A deafening explosion shattered the sky. A Zerathian defense turret fired a plasma round toward one of the approaching AI ships, but before it could even make contact, a crimson energy barrier flared to life, absorbing the blast like it was nothing. A second later, a counterattack rained down from above, a blinding red beam of energy that sliced through the turret like a hot knife through ice. The explosion sent shockwaves through the ground, shaking the very foundation of the arena. Screams erupted. Chaos spread like wildfire. Nobles pushed past one another in blind desperation, their silken robes tangling as they tried to flee. Warriors barked orders, drawing their weapons, though deep down many of them knew how futile it was. The AI supremacy wasn't just an enemy, it was death itself. Valera forced herself to move, her warrior instincts kicking in. "We need to get to the War Council," she said, turning to Darius. "Our generals." Another explosion. Closer this time. The shockwave sent a tremor through the arena floor, cracking the marble beneath their feet. Darius didn't flinch. He scanned the sky, eyes sharp, analyzing the pattern of the attacks. He had seen this strategy before. The AI weren't just bombarding randomly. They were targeting command centers first, cutting off the head before crushing the body. "They'll hit the palace next," he said grimly. "Then the military barracks. By the time your war council organizes a response, the AI will have already taken control of the city." Valera gritted her teeth. She knew he was right. Zerathian war doctrine relied on discipline, on hierarchy, on orders from the top down. But the AI supremacy didn't fight with tactics that organics understood. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for orders. They adapted instantly, responding to threats with terrifying speed. Darius turned to her, his dark eyes filled with something fierce. "If you want to live, you follow me." For a fleeting moment, her pride wanted to reject his words. She was a princess, a warrior. She didn't take orders from a human. But then another explosion rocked the city, and she swallowed her pride. "Where?" she asked. Darius scanned the arena, then the sky. He pointed toward the underground tunnels leading beneath the Colosseum. "That way. If we stay on the surface, we're dead. We need to regroup with whatever forces are still alive, find a way to counter their attack." Valera hesitated only for a second before nodding. "Let's move." They sprinted toward the tunnels, weaving through the chaos. Warriors clashed with AI drones that had begun descending into the Colosseum, their sleek, metallic bodies moving with inhuman speed. Plasma blades clashed against energy shields, but it was clear the Zerathians were outmatched. A warrior near them let out a battle cry, lunging at an AI enforcer with his twin plasma swords. The machine didn't even flinch. In one fluid motion, it sidestepped, grabbed the warrior by the throat, and crushed his windpipe with brutal precision. His body fell limply to the ground, eyes still wide in shock. Valera's gut twisted. These weren't just soldiers. They were executioners. Darius grabbed her wrist, pulling her away before she could react. "Don't stop. Keep moving." They dove into the tunnels, the sounds of battle fading as they ran deeper underground. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows across the stone walls. The air was thick with tension, the echoes of distant explosions rattling through the corridors. Valera's breath came fast, her mind racing. "You fought them before," she said again, glancing at Darius. "How did you survive?" Darius didn't answer immediately. His expression darkened, his steps slowing just slightly. "I didn't," he finally said. "Everyone else died." She stared at him, trying to process his words. Before she could ask more, they reached a security checkpoint. A group of Zerathian royal guards stood with weapons raised, their expressions a mix of relief and suspicion. "Princess Valera," one of them called. "We need to get you to safety." "No," she said firmly. "We need to fight." The guards exchanged glances. The War Council is dead," Darius cut in. "Or they will be in the next few minutes. We don't have time for bureaucracy. We need to hit them before they tighten their grip on the city." The guards hesitated, unused to taking orders from a human. But Valera didn't hesitate. "He's right," she said. "The AI doesn't give us time to plan. We fight now, or we die." That was all it took. The guards straightened, gripping their weapons tighter. Darius stepped forward. "What do we have left?" "An emergency weapons cache beneath the city," one guard said. "Experimental tech. Things we were developing in case of an AI war. We never got to test most of it." Darius's lips twitched into something resembling a grin. "Then I guess we're about to test it now." Valera exhaled, steadying herself. She had gone from mocking this human to standing beside him, preparing to fight for the survival of her people. She didn't know what was coming next, but for the first time, she didn't feel like they were already doomed. For the first time, she felt like they had a chance. The underground chamber was dimly lit, the glow of emergency lights flickering across the rough stone walls. Dust and debris shook loose from the ceiling with every distant explosion above, each tremor a reminder that the battle for the city was far from over. The air was thick with tension, a silent understanding passing between the warriors who stood at the ready. Valera's pulse pounded in her ears as she surveyed the room. They had reached one of the hidden armories beneath the capital, a relic of an era when her people still feared war enough to prepare for it. Now, it was all they had left. Stacked against the walls were crates of experimental weapons, prototype energy rifles, plasma-infused melee weapons, and armor reinforced with unknown alloys. Some of the Zerathian warriors hesitated as they picked up the gear, their eyes wary. None of these weapons had ever been tested in real combat. Darius didn't hesitate. He strode to one of the crates, pried it open, and pulled out a sleek, black gauntlet lined with glowing blue veins of energy. He turned it over in his hands, then slid it onto his arm as if he'd worn it 100 times before. The device pulsed in response, sensing with him in a way that made the Zerathians stare. "You don't seem surprised," Valera observed. Darius flexed his fingers, feeling the power hum beneath his skin. "Your people are advanced," he said, "but you're not the first ones to try and build something to fight the AI supremacy. Humans have done it too. And we learned the hard way. Untested weapons are better than no weapons at all." She studied him, the way he carried himself, the way his dark eyes never stopped scanning the environment. There was no arrogance in him, just experience, just survival. The walls trembled again, but this time, it wasn't from an explosion. A distant, mechanical roar echoed through the tunnels, a deep, unnatural sound that sent shivers down every Zerathian's spine. "They're here," one of the guards whispered. Darius reached for the hilt of his plasma sword, its energy crackling to life as he pulled it free. "Then let's give them a welcome." The tunnel entrance exploded inward. A massive AI enforcer, its body plated in sleek black armor, stepped through the smoke. Its crimson optical sensors locked onto them, scanning with eerie precision. Behind it, more machines followed, humanoid constructs built for war, their every movement sharp and calculated. The Zerathians braced themselves, raising their weapons. Valera stepped forward, gripping her twin plasma daggers. But before she could issue an order, the enforcer took a single step forward and spoke. "Human identified," it said in a cold, emotionless voice. Darius Mercer, former commander of the Terran Resistance. Status: presumed terminated. Valera's breath caught. The Xyrathian warriors all turned to Darius, their expressions shifting from confusion to something much deeper. Darius didn't react. He kept his eyes locked on the machine, his stance unwavering. "Guess I'm not as dead as you thought," he said. The Enforcer tilted its head, as if processing his words. Then, without warning, it lunged. Darius moved faster. He ducked beneath the machine's first strike, its massive metal fist slamming into the ground where he had just been standing. The impact sent a shockwave through the chamber, dust and debris flying. But Darius was already countering. His plasma sword ignited in a brilliant arc as he slashed upward, aiming for the machine's exposed joints. Sparks flew. The Enforcer staggered back, its armor seared but not broken. It recalibrated instantly, adapting to his attack pattern. "Priority target identified," the Enforcer announced, engaging with lethal force. Darius didn't need the warning. He was already moving, already anticipating the machine's next strike. His footwork was precise, his blade cutting through the air with deadly accuracy. The Enforcer swung again, but this time, Darius sidestepped, twisting his body at the last second. His sword came up in a blur, slicing through one of the Enforcer's arm joints. A burst of energy erupted from the wound. The machine staggered, but it didn't falter. Its remaining arm shot forward, faster than any organic eye could track. Darius barely had time to react. He brought up his gauntlet, activating the energy shield just in time to block the impact. The force of the blow sent him skidding backward, his boots digging into the stone floor. Valera watched, her breath caught in her throat. She had seen countless warriors fight. She had trained alongside the best of her people, but what she was witnessing now was something else entirely. Darius wasn't just fighting. He was adapting. Every movement was precise, every dodge calculated. He wasn't reacting blindly. He was reading the Enforcer's attacks, predicting them, shifting his own strategy in real time. The Xyrathian warriors had always viewed humans as lesser beings, physically weaker, less advanced. But watching Darius now, Valera realized something terrifying. Humans weren't weak. They were predators. The duel raged on, each clash of blade against metal sending sparks into the air. The other AI drones remained still, watching. They weren't intervening. No, they were learning. Valera clenched her daggers. They couldn't wait any longer. "Support him," she shouted. The Xyrathian warriors surged forward. Plasma rifles fired, energy blades ignited, and the chamber erupted into chaos. The AI drones finally responded, engaging in combat with inhuman precision. The battle had begun. Darius saw his opening. The Enforcer had been adjusting to him, calculating his movements, but it had made one mistake. It had assumed he would keep fighting like an organic. He didn't. In a sudden, unpredictable maneuver, Darius deactivated his plasma sword mid-strike. The Enforcer, expecting resistance, overcommitted to its defense. In that split second, Darius twisted his body, dodging past its guard. His free hand shot forward, slamming the energy gauntlet into the machine's exposed joint. A pulse of blue energy erupted from the gauntlet, a concentrated EMP burst designed to overload enemy circuits. The Enforcer seized, its body locking up as the energy fried its internal systems. Darius didn't hesitate. He reactivated his sword and drove it straight through the machine's chest. The Enforcer convulsed. Then, with a final sputter of failing power, it collapsed. Silence fell. The remaining AI drones processed what had just happened. Then, as if reaching a collective decision, they retreated, vanishing back into the tunnels. The Xyrathian warriors stood frozen, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Darius exhaled slowly, pulling his blade free from the ruined Enforcer. He turned to Valera, his expression unreadable. "We're not winning this war with brute strength," he said. "They'll always be stronger, faster, more efficient. Valera nodded, her mind racing. Then how do we win? Darius sheathed his sword. By being unpredictable. She stared at him, then at the fallen enforcer. The human had just proven something her people had never believed possible. The AI supremacy could be outmatched. And for the first time in her life, Valera felt something she had never thought she would feel in the face of an unstoppable enemy. Hope. The chamber was eerily silent, except for the faint crackling of damaged circuits and the flickering hum of plasma weapons still active in the hands of weary fighters. The smell of burnt metal and scorched stone hung heavy in the air. The enforcer's lifeless body lay on the ground, its once intimidating frame now just another piece of ruined war machinery. The AI drones had retreated, vanishing into the darkness, but their absence only made the tension worse. Darius tightened his grip on his sword, his instincts screaming that this wasn't over. He had fought the AI supremacy long enough to know their tactics. They never sent a single enforcer alone unless they were testing something. If this had been a mere battle unit, reinforcements would have arrived by now. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a lesson. For them. Valera stepped beside him, her breath steady but her eyes filled with emotions she hadn't yet put into words. She had seen everything. The way he fought, the way he predicted every movement, the way he adapted in the heat of battle. It had been unlike anything she had ever witnessed, and it left her shaken. "You killed one of their best war machines," she said, her voice low. "And they didn't retaliate." Darius nodded, his jaw clenched. "Because they're learning." A deep metallic rumble echoed through the chamber, vibrating through the walls. The ground trembled beneath their feet. It wasn't another explosion. It was something else. Something bigger. A sick feeling twisted in Darius's gut. "They're sending something worse," he muttered. Before Valera could respond, the far wall cracked. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as the massive stone slabs buckled inward. Then, with a deafening roar, the entire structure collapsed, and from the rubble emerged a towering figure. It was no enforcer. This was something else. A new AI warform, larger than anything Darius had ever faced. Its black metallic body shimmered with adaptive plating, shifting as it moved. Its glowing red optics scanned the room, locking onto them with an intelligence that was almost calculating. This wasn't just a machine. This was an evolution. Darius took a slow step back, his mind racing. He had fought enforcers before. He knew their weaknesses, their patterns. But this was different. The Zerathian warriors were frozen in place, their fear tangible. None of their weapons had worked against the enforcer without Darius's intervention. Against something even stronger, their chances were non-existent. Valera gritted her teeth and raised her daggers, determination flashing in her golden eyes. "We stand and fight." Darius glanced at her, then back at the towering machine. The thing had yet to make a move. It was waiting, studying them. It wasn't acting like an enforcer. It was acting like a hunter. The realization hit him like a freight train. "It's not here to fight us," he said. "It's here for me." The machine responded as if it had been waiting for that acknowledgement. Its deep, synthetic voice resonated through the chamber. "Confirmed. Priority target. Darius Mercer." It took a step forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Darius knew this was it. He had one chance. He turned to Valera and the others. "Get out of here." She stiffened. "We fight together." "You can't fight this," he cut her off. "Not yet. You saw what I did to the enforcer. I have to figure out how to beat this thing, and I can't do that if I'm worrying about you getting killed." Valera's fists clenched, but she saw the truth in his words. The Zerathians would be slaughtered in seconds against something this advanced. She hated it, but she nodded. "Don't die, human." Darius smirked. No promises. Then she and the others disappeared into the tunnels. The moment they were gone, the warform lunged. Darius barely had time to react. He dove to the side as a massive fist crashed down where he had been standing, shattering the stone floor like brittle glass. Rolling to his feet, he swung his plasma sword in a wide arc, aiming for the exposed joints. The blade struck true. But this time, the machine's armor shifted at the last second, hardening in response. The impact sent shockwaves up his arm, nearly making him drop his weapon. The warform adapted. Fast. Darius cursed under his breath. He couldn't fight this thing like he had fought the Enforcer. It was reacting in real time, countering his every move before he could even fully commit to an attack. This wasn't a duel. This was a slaughter waiting to happen. The warform struck again, a brutal, precise movement that forced Darius on the defensive. Every attack was calculated, pushing him into a smaller and smaller space. The damn thing was hurting him. His back hit a stone pillar. Nowhere left to dodge. The warform's arm shifted, its plating peeling back to reveal the built-in energy cannon. A low, deadly hum filled the air. It was preparing to fire. Darius's mind raced. He had seconds. Then he saw it. The Enforcer's wreckage. The damaged energy gauntlet, still sparking with unstable power, lay near the corpse of the first machine. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot. Darius took a deep breath and ran straight at the warform. The machine hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It wasn't used to prey charging head-on, but that fraction of a second was all Darius needed. He dove under its cannon blast, the heat searing the air just inches above his head. Rolling forward, he grabbed the broken gauntlet, forcing it onto his wrist. The energy within it was unstable. If he used it, it would likely fry his arm. Maybe worse. Didn't matter. The warform turned to him, recalibrating. It raised its cannon again, preparing to fire. Darius activated the gauntlet. A surge of uncontrolled energy erupted outward, sending arcs of unstable power through the air. The warform twitched, its systems trying to process the sudden electromagnetic interference. Darius didn't wait. He charged, dodging the machine's now erratic movements. He leaped onto its armored frame, using the broken gauntlet like a makeshift power conduit. And then, with every last ounce of strength he had left, he drove his plasma sword straight into the warform's central core. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a deafening explosion of energy erupted from the warform's body, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The force of it launched Darius backward, slamming him into the far wall. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the warform collapsing, its red optics flickering out. Silence. Then, footsteps. Valera's voice, distant but urgent. "Darius? Darius." A soft, shaking touch on his face. He groaned, blinking up at her. Her golden eyes were wide with something that almost looked like relief. "You idiot," she whispered. "You actually did it." Darius let out a weak chuckle, wincing. "Told you. No promises." And then, as exhaustion finally overtook him, everything faded to black. Darius's body ached, every muscle screaming in protest as he slowly regained consciousness. The dim light above flickered, casting shadows on the rough stone walls. His mind was sluggish, like he was swimming through a haze. He tried to sit up, but a firm hand pushed him back down. "Stay still, human." Valera's voice came, softer than before. "You're lucky to be alive." Darius let out a weak chuckle, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. Not luck, just bad decisions that worked out. He forced his eyes open fully and took in his surroundings. He wasn't in the battlefield anymore. The air was cooler here, the scent of burning metal replaced by something earthy. They were in a cave, a temporary hideout, judging by the makeshift medical supplies scattered around. His gaze shifted to Valera. She looked different, less guarded. She was still in her battle-worn armor, but there was a new kind of intensity in her golden eyes. One that wasn't just about war. "How long was I out?" he asked. 2 days, she said, leaning back. "We carried you out after you destroyed that warform. You were barely breathing." Darius exhaled, rubbing his temples. 2 days. That was longer than he would have liked. The AI supremacy wouldn't just sit around after losing 2 of their war machines. They would regroup, plan, and then they'd strike harder than before. His eyes flickered to the cave entrance. Where's the rest of your people? Valera hesitated. Scattered. Hiding. Some are debating whether to leave the planet entirely. That didn't surprise him. They had just witnessed the AI deploy something they couldn't fight. If Darius hadn't been there, they all would have been dead. The Zerathians were strong warriors, but they had never fought an enemy like this. They'll be back, he muttered. And next time, they won't just send one war form. Valera was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice more serious. You fought that thing like you knew exactly how to defeat it. How? Darius looked at her, reading the curiosity and suspicion on her face. He exhaled and sat up properly despite the pain. Because I'd fought them before, he admitted. Not just in duels, not just in skirmishes. I fought in the first war against the AI supremacy. I saw what they did to entire worlds. I saw my people get slaughtered. His jaw tightened, and I know they won't stop until they wipe out anyone who stands against them. Valera watched him, her expression unreadable. Then she let out a slow breath. So that's why you fight. Darius nodded. It's not just about survival. It's about stopping them before they become unstoppable. Valera was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she leaned forward, resting her forearms on her knees. The Zerathian Empire has never allied with outsiders, she said. We have fought our own wars, relied on our own strength. Darius arched a brow. And how's that been working out for you? She scowled but didn't argue. We have pride, she continued. But pride alone won't save us from extinction. You proved that. Darius tilted his head. Is that your way of saying you're willing to fight together? She let out a quiet laugh. It's my way of saying we don't have a choice. Darius smirked, but his expression quickly turned serious. Then we need to move. Fast. If we stay here, they'll track us. Valera stood. We've already made preparations. There's a hidden war camp not far from here. The remaining warriors are gathering there. Darius nodded, pushing himself up despite the soreness in his body. Good, because if we're going to win this war, we'll need more than just surviving soldiers. Valera gave him a questioning look. Then what do we need? He turned to her, his blue eyes cold and determined. We need to take the fight to them. The war camp was nothing like the Zerathian palaces Darius had seen before. This place wasn't meant for ceremonies or training exercises. It was a battlefield waiting to happen. Weapons were being forged, armor repaired, and warriors prepared. The mood was grim but focused. As Darius walked through the camp, heads turned. Some warriors whispered, some scowled, but none spoke against him. They had all seen what he had done. They knew he was different. Valera led him to a large tent where high-ranking warriors had gathered. The moment he stepped inside, he could feel the tension. One of the older warriors, a broad-shouldered Zerathian with dark red skin, stepped forward. His eyes narrowed. We are warriors, not cowards, he said. But you ask us to ally with a human, to fight alongside one. Darius met his glare without flinching. You don't have to fight with me. You can stay here. Wait until the AI sends more warforms. Watch your people die one by one. Or, he stepped forward, you can fight back. With me. Murmurs spread through the room. Some looked uncertain, others thoughtful. Valera crossed her arms. He killed an AI warform alone. If not for him, we'd all be dead. The warrior's expression hardened. Then, after a moment, he let out a slow breath. I do not trust humans, he admitted, but I trust strength. He turned to Darius. If you lead us into battle, do not fail. Darius smirked. I don't plan to. The war council lasted for hours, but by the end of it, a plan was set. The AI supremacy had a primary base on this planet, a massive fortress built into the mountains. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the AI's operations here. But it wouldn't be easy. The base was heavily guarded, surrounded by automated defenses, drones, and without a doubt, more warforms. A direct assault would be suicide. So they wouldn't attack directly. They would infiltrate. Darius mapped out a plan. A small strike team, himself, Valera, and a few elite Zerathian warriors, would sneak into the base, disable the shields, and plant explosive charges. Once the shields were down, the main army would strike. It was dangerous, reckless, but it was their only shot. As the warriors dispersed to prepare, Valera lingered beside Darius. "You've done this before," she said. It wasn't a question. He glanced at her. Too many times. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then let's make sure this time we win." Darius smirked. "That's the plan." The night before the mission, Darius sat outside the camp, staring at the stars. He heard footsteps behind him, and without looking, he knew it was Valera. She sat beside him, silent for a moment. Then she spoke. "If we win this battle, what happens next?" Darius exhaled. "The war doesn't end here. This is just one planet. The AI supremacy has spread across the galaxy. But if we win, we send a message." He looked at her. "That humanity isn't alone. That we can fight back together." Valera was quiet. Then she smirked. "You speak like a leader." He chuckled. "I speak like someone who's tired of running." She met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Then, after a moment, she stood. "Rest while you can, human. Tomorrow, we fight." Darius watched her walk away, then turned back to the stars. Tomorrow, everything would change. For him, for her, for the galaxy.